I'm Rhett Sutter, and I'm doing a demonstration tape on the modern audio equipment that our studio has, just in case you want to come and record in our modern studio.
Nuclear Gopher was a record label and online community of Jehovah's Witnesses who all did indie music. It just blew up, but it all stayed in these weird little bounds.
Witnesses can listen to music. It's not like a Footloose situation where like the preacher's like, no music ever, but stuff is frowned upon.
You need to really beware of that disco beat, because that disco beat invites the demons. This is not inviting the demons, it's enriching.
They think that any moment now, God is going to destroy the world.
At 17, I basically thought to myself, what am I doing? Is this how I want to live my life? Like, do I even believe this?
If they just treated people all right and had some kooky beliefs, I could totally live with it. But friends who committed suicide because they're gay and they're a witness, everything just changed.
Music was my savior at that point.
The moment people started taking it seriously is the moment that someone would start to, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
We started talking, and she's like, well, so if we split up, would you still be a witness? What I actually said was, no, I don't believe any of it anymore. And I never saw her again.
Your wife?
Yeah, I never physically saw her again.
It was an orphan, hidden fist fight. Before I saw God.
Nuclear Gopher was very special. It created a space for people to be eccentric and creative, and also as healthy as you could be in that culture. And while it lasted, it was like the best.
I am so sorry I went through all of that and my mic was off. This is a very, very professional operation. Well-oiled machine. Thank you, Mrs. Jakesick, for pointing that out. Okay, so again, thank you for joining us. I saw the movie Witness Underground this week in a private screening. Was absolutely blown away by how good it was. So I thought it would be great to get some of the people involved in the project on to the channel to have a talk about it. So it's my great honor and privilege to be joined by Scott Homan, who produced and directed the movie. Hi, Scott.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Hello, everybody. Great. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. Sorry about that little mishap at the beginning.
That's okay. I'm sure you'll salvage it.
Okay, and we're also joined by Eric, who was in the movie. Hi, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Great. Thanks for joining us. And we did have Ryan. Not sure. Oh, he's back again. Here we go.
Great.
Ryan Sutter, who was also in the movie. Hi, Ryan. How are you doing?
Hello. Can you hear me? I'm good.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, sorry about the connectivity issues. I've been sort of fighting with the technology for a little bit here, but I'm good now, I hope.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, so I was just saying before that there will be an opportunity for the viewers to ask questions. So viewers, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them at some point. Okay, so first of all, Scott, what inspired you to start this project and make this movie telling the story of those involved?
It started in 2016 where I met a a man who left religion and was also who'd come out gay at the same time at 19. And I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to tell something about this story forever. Let's just start an interview. And that led to a whole series on YouTube called ExJW Coming Out. And then we crowdfunded. I wanted to do something bigger. I wanted to do a whole documentary. So when I was a witness, I had seen basically every movie that ever came out about the topic. And so I realized like the movies have a power. Like most witnesses won't go on and research anything or do any searches related to the religion because they're scared of losing their faith or something or challenges their faiths. But I knew that there's people like me in the religion that they might watch a movie, and it's like a much bigger thing, and it gets a lot more publicity than just some post text in a Reddit or a video someone makes selfie cam to the laptop or a cell phone. So I want to make this film, and when I was doing the crowdfund, I was really wondering about who to interview because I'd already done like 15 or 20 interviews or something. And I was like, all my projects I'd done before, I realized in not just religion related, it makes it a lot better and from my perspective, or a lot easier to work with people if you know them. And so I knew Eric and I knew of Ryan's story, but I wanted to get in touch with him. And then we did an interview that was sort of like a pilot thing that was for that ExJW Coming Out project. And that interview was amazing. And I just had this in my mind that I could make something with this group of people that I knew very well. And they had a lot of music and they had a lot of archival videos, and that it could turn into that alone could turn into a documentary. And I think it ended up being an amazingly good choice. Then I ended up shooting like another 7 interviews that I haven't even looked at yet after that, because this has just absorbed all of my time and effort. And I think the story is powerful. So that's the longer version. Sorry.
That's okay, no problem. Yeah, I completely agree. After watching it this week, it is a very, very powerful film. And the stories of there were a lot of people involved, but I don't think the number of people involved diminished the individual stories. I mean, that the journey that each person was going through came through very, very loud and clear, and it was a really, really moving thing to see.
Thank you.
So can I just ask both Eric and Ryan, when Scott approached you about this project, did you have any reservations to begin with about taking part in it?
After you, Ryan.
Absolutely. I guess I probably had the advantage at the time that Scott approached me that I didn't know Scott yet enough to know how committed and passionate he was about getting stuff done. So when he reached out to me, I was at first quite willing to just be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll tell you everything. It's all good. With the sort of not explicit, but general expectation internally of like, I'll make a connection to another person. He seems like a pretty good guy. This is cool. We'll connect on this topic. It's always good to have other ExJW friends. I didn't think it was going to turn into a movie so much of a risk, but I was actually, once it actually started shaping up over the course of the production, that's when I started getting super nervous. I'm like, oh my goodness, he's actually going to do this. People are going to see this. This is going to be real. This is going to change my life a little bit. But I've been very supportive of it from the beginning because it's actually been such a rewarding experience that it sort of offsets any fear or trepidation I had about it.
That's great. Thank you. And what about you, Eric?
I trusted it in Scott's hands, but obviously treading these waters is complicated. And even to this day, there's a part of me that honestly was nervous about upsetting people. There's something upsetting to people who are still active witnesses that we would even think of doing something like this. Just the act of doing it, no matter how even-handed or gentle the production is, it comes across as an affront. And as backwards as I think that might be, even just like intellectually, I still didn't want to I don't think any of us are out specifically to upset anyone. We were just telling our story. And also, all of us, how our families or people in our social sphere may respond is always a consideration as well. But I guess at the end of the day, for me, I just thought this is my story to tell, and I think it's amazing that Scott's even having the guts and the dedication to go for it. And so, of course, I'm going to offer whatever I can, and go ahead and use all my music and let's do a thing and make something cool. I like that he tricked Ryan into being super honest at the beginning. So we got Ryan totally open, and then Scott was devious enough to actually complete the film and do a great job. So,
I will say this: I was really straightforward with Scott at the beginning. That it was important to me that this was not a hatchet job. This was not a thing that was all just about, hey, the Watchtower Society is evil, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that wasn't, there's a lot of that already online. There's a lot of resources for people who need to, go get into doctrinal discussions and need to debate things or prove things or disprove things, or even get into the morality of witness policies. The goal of this was to be more biographical, to more humanize for witnesses and ex-witnesses and people who have never been a witness, but who have known them or had an analogous experience, like to just sort of use what we went through as a way to bring a human face to it and to allow for hopefully some kind of decency and compassion. And it was never, like, let's go attack the Watchtower. And I that was important to me, like that was the way the film got made. And again, like I said, Scott did an awesome job.
Yeah, he absolutely did. That's something that I really liked about the movie. It wasn't all about showing the Watchtower organization in a negative light, although through the negative experiences that you each had, that does come through, but that wasn't the focus of it. The focus was on you guys and telling your story and highlighting how you were all brought together by this passion for music, which that's something that really appealed to me a lot, because I do respect people who have some kind of artistic or creative talent, because I have absolutely none. And it's something that I'm very envious of in artistic people. But I really did like that about the movie. One thing that I found really, really moving, it was at some parts quite difficult to watch, was how this talent that you had was stifled, even though you were expressing that to the extent that your circumstances allowed you. It was still stifled, and I found that really sad. Do you have anything to say on that?
This time, Eric, I'm gonna throw to you first.
How dare you? Those feelings come and go. I think to the extent that there's certainly missed opportunities over the years and stuff, but I think to the extent that it was stifled, I think it probably had a hand in making our creative output better, because you can try and stop someone from being creative. A person can even try and stop themselves from being creative, but that's going to come out somehow. Since then I've been able to make a ton of music, and I think in many ways it's sort of like being a witness. You can focus on all the bad stuff, but without that experience, I doubt I would have been talking about the League of Nations as an 8-year-old, like I wouldn't be so concerned with world politics. I wouldn't have been reading that much. And, so there's definitely an upside to it. But with that said, I'm not trying to be too Pollyanna about the whole thing. I do have anger about what I could have done. But I guess the key is to do your best to learn from it and just do what you can now, because you could either sit there and be really angry about it, or you could make something amazing. And so I try and do that as often as possible.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily realize how stifling it was at the time. So in retrospect, yeah, I mean, I think about actually even a little bit less so for me and a little more so for Rhett, my older brother, who, by the way, I got to show, is the subject of this T-shirt.
Oh wow, that's so
cool. That's an actual photograph. That's not even a cartoon. It's literally that was from a picture of him holding a Watchtower at an assembly once.
Oh wow.
But Rhett was such a stupidly talented person. He when he was 6-7 years old, he was on stage drumming with my mom's band at somebody's wedding reception. He was like in the running to be on some Ed McMahon reality early version of, you know, American Idol type thing back in the 80s. He was one of the best jazz band drummers in the state of Minnesota, and his school band won and stuff. I mean, the guy was just, from the time he was old enough to hold a pair of drumsticks or touch a keyboard, he could play everything all the time. And I think what could Rhett have been able to do if he hadn't been a witness, if he had been able to go to Juilliard, if he had been able to become a recording artist, even just a studio musician at his skill level. And it just seems like a shame that somebody who had that ability wound up having to work terrible janitorial jobs and, you know, not go to college or do anything with it outside of recording stuff, which admittedly we had a great time with. And I agree with Eric, there was so much good that came out of it, but you know, the stifling side of that was something that I do also think back on, you know, like how what could have been is hard not to think about sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine it must be. Have you experienced any kind of negative blowback as a result of you know, being involved with this project? If you could answer that, Scott, from like a production point of view.
Negative blowback. I think that will come over time, because we're just soft releasing it on the Patreon, and my goal is by the end of tomorrow have it sent out to be on a more wider release for streaming. And so once it's publicly available, I imagine more people watching it will have a reaction, and maybe JWs will watch it, or I don't know, legally, but yeah, not really. I mean, most people, if they write me, it's like with amazing feedback about this story or the artist or the music, or they want the album, they want to have the soundtrack, or like amazed that there was a music scene at all in the religion. Like anyone on the East Coast is like, this never would have happened. And all the West Coast are like, yeah. And this is in the States, Canada. They're like, yeah, we had a scene just like that. Oh my God, there's this band playing this weekend. You got to check them out. They're also ex-witnesses. So like that's been really interesting. And I've been hearing from musicians all over the world who used to be in the religion or were musicians in the religion and finally are out. Now they're doing it seriously. Like there's this metalcore band in Australia who's really good. And I try to post this kind of stuff whenever I've discovered on the Patreon, just as like publicly available to help them out, promote them a little bit, just get some awareness for their art. But yeah, nothing negative so far, which is nice.
Good. What about you guys, Eric and Ryan? Have you received any kind of negative feedback from like former witness friends or family?
I think the closest I've gotten is I have a big family who are all at varying levels of connection to the witnesses, and I've had family members say like, what do you think is going to happen when this thing comes out? Like, you know, and I'm just, I don't know. I'm going to let people make their own decision. I think we're all grown-ups now. Like, I'm 41. I can't spend my whole life being hyper concerned with if I read science books or not, and whether that might upset somebody. You know, and so that's about the extent. But I mean, we've had such a limited release. I guess there's definitely a voice in my head that's like, just wait for it. You know, if anything interesting is going to happen, it's probably approaching over the horizon. But I think it's like anything, especially when you do something as charged as this project, you're going to get a variety of responses. Most of them are going to be fine. Some of them are going to be especially good. And there's going to be a fringe element on the other side of the bell curve that is probably really not going to be happy about it. But it will inspire conversation, which I think is definitely part of the goal. And let the chips fall where they may. I was just honest about my story, and that's all I can really do.
Yeah,
Ditto what he said. I haven't had any negative feedback yet. It's been actually mostly positive from the people who have seen it. We had a big Minneapolis premiere showing, and a lot of people. That's kind of our neck of the woods. So that's the one I was mostly nervous about. I thought if anybody's going to be yelling or screaming, this is where it's going to happen. And so far, it's been really quite supportive. I have extended family who are not witnesses, who have seen the film, who have, it's made a big difference positively for us. So that's been great. And I guess I figure it this way. I've been already being shunned for like going on 19 years. What are you going to do? Shun me more? I mean,
I know exactly what you mean. That's exactly how I reasoned to myself when I recorded my first YouTube video. I had it sitting there as a private video for a good few weeks before I released it publicly. And, specifically because I was, hesitant about any negative feedback I would get from current witnesses, former friends, family, and how it would affect them. But then I thought to myself, they're shunning me. Why should their opinion count?
Yeah.
That's actually
Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Oh, that's one of the big reasons that I wanted to finally make something on this topic, was because they take everything away from you on day one, regardless of the rule you broke or the thought crime that you committed by having your own ideas about reality. And not having connection to family is like infuriating on some level, kind of, and it never sort of ends. Someone said the other day, like, it's the gift that keeps on giving. And knowing that, like, this film is a reaction to being shunned. If you don't want this kind of stuff to exist, stop treating people that way. It's I feel like I'm in a hated group of society by the people that should love you, and like that's some form of crazy emotional abuse. And at some point it's like, I need to make something to like make an impact on society, and that's one of my big underlying motivations for this. And the general theme of the film is a story about shunning, and how you go from being loved and praised and celebrated to overnight that changing and it never changing back. And I think, Ryan's story really is powerful. Like, I have a very similar story, but his is just the series of losses that cascade in the middle of the film, that are very understandable and relatable from a human perspective, but especially for anyone who's ever left this religion. Illustrated the point that I think that anyone watching this show right now, or cares about this topic, or is posting online about anything, part of any community related to ExJW's witnesses, will totally relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your favorite part of making this film?
I think, okay, so give a little backstory. I had been, I went after leaving the religion back to college, and then realized I didn't really care all that much about what I had studied. I knew it could make some good money, but I was a bit frustrated that it wasn't. And this is during the recession. So I was like, you know what? I think I just need a break and to do something I love with my freedom. And I went to Vietnam with a camera to just get back into filmmaking, because I'd done a lot of that as a teenager and always had a big passion for photography. And I went to photography school. When I met Eric and that crew in the film, I lived in Minneapolis. I went to photography school. But I'd sort of like let it die, and that I'd sold all my gear at some point, and then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go back. So when I was in Vietnam, I just like started playing live music again, and I started rekindling a passion for music. But through that, I realized like all the musicians I was surrounded by, this big international community, were much more serious about music and had raw talent, and I just started filming them and doing like live performance music videos. So to bring it to your question, probably the most interesting, fun thing for me was to plan the live performance parts of the film, and because I knew the story could connect through music, but I had not even like listened to most of their music or seen most of their films yet. But I knew that I wanted to do this thing that I had sort of practiced and developed through like 70, 80 live performance music videos that I had made in Vietnam with other artists, totally unrelated to this project. But then to do that with these guys live was sort of this thing I thought could like pull it together visually, like connect the past with the present and show off their talent in a raw live performance setting. And I want to do this new 2-camera setup where we just like rotate around the room while they're performing. And I got a friend of mine to take my second camera and shoot. And like that whole thing ended up like, I feel like it worked really well. It's really raw, but that's sort of, I don't know, my style, I guess. And it was really fun. And like putting that together felt like it wasn't going to happen or work. And it was just like, there was like 30 things that could happen that day, the shoot day, that would make that all not function or work at all or fall apart. And it all came together. Like Eric and the whole crew, Eric and Ryan and everyone else in the film really pulled it together and made it all happen despite lots of little challenges. And there's some fun story related to that.
Yeah, there's definitely, that's also my favorite part. Just because that was everything Scott just said. It was like just the most insanely fun, awesome day. And also I'm just going to point out Scott picked the only part in the movie where he appears, so as his favorite part. So I'm just saying.
Bias.
I had to put some Hitchcock little moments in there. I present myself.
Yeah, it definitely looked like a lot of fun to film. And something that really, really stood out to me was the sheer volume of home video footage. I mean, was that just, of course, I mean, when you were filming that back in the 90s, you obviously had no idea that this movie would ever be made.
Yeah.
But is there any backstory as to why you know, especially you, Ryan? I think most of the home video footage was from you and your brother. Is there any particular reason why you just recorded so much of what you were doing?
Our primary hobby was media production. Like from the time we were in elementary school, we would go to school, we'd come home, we'd record music. And then I bought a VCR when I was like 4th or 5th grade. And then I bought a video camera at a garage sale. So we were just always doing it because it was fun. We never had, you know, ambitions with it, but we also grew up and didn't exactly stop, you know, like we didn't like graduate and grow up and get out of the house and start families and then be like, okay, now let's grow up. No, we just kept making the same dumb movies and doing the same dumb stuff and having a good time because it was fun. And so there's really no greater answer other than we were having a lot of fun. Now, why it all still exists is because I am an avid preservationist of this part of my life. I have preserved everything that I can, not because I thought someday somebody will make a movie out of this, but because it just is so personally enriching to me to have this, and I can't imagine not having it. So it's really ridiculous's satisfying for me to see all of that stuff get pulled together and turned into this, because it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's a very, very pleasant surprise. And every time I watch the movie, I have the same response. I'm just like, oh, I can't believe this exists.
It all worked out so well. And then, you know, the footage really fit well into the film. You know, it's very serendipitous.
I think technically I'm probably behind the camera on more of the footage in this movie than Scott is.
yeah, actually, that's a good point. That's a good point. If I could ask each of you this, what would you like to be the takeaway point for anybody watching this film?
One of my big things is I want shunning to be seen as a form of evil and maybe like something you can litigate against, or something for the religion to reform, or for families to soften up on it, because it's really a dark part of humanity. And the governments are trying to like do some of this in Europe, especially. There's a lot of cases right now where the religion's being defunded for this specific reason, and other reasons, but also this. And it's like the blood transfusion issue should be against the law. Like denying medical care, people are dying. The child sex abuse issue, like that's against the law in every country in the world. That should be dealt with. But shunning is no one really understands how severe or how ridiculous it is. And are shocked when I say that, you know, even I with my like fringy, barely in their religion family, they do it, and they didn't even have to, because technically I just don't care enough to do the things, the two paths that they give you. One is they kick you out, and one is that you write a letter to them and tell them, give them power to control your life in your family life by disassociating. I just did my own ceremony and called it good, and originally faded away. So I should have the ability to have a relationship with my family. So I find the coercive control that they have over families, to make them do this, or make them feel like they have to do this to be able to get into an afterlife with their God, is really dark. And people should see this religion not as like harmless, but as like a net negative to society, to bring the channel to a heavy level.
Yeah, great. What about you guys?
Are here. Sorry if I just gave some PTSD.
You're up, Eric.
Riley. Oh, okay. Well, I think I can sum it up pretty good in the movie. Probably better than I will now. But just to see that the whole thing that you're told as a witness, that if you leave, you're, going to completely spin out and live this terrible life, is a ridiculous lie. And we've, I think, all personally seen people where that has happened. And that's often due in large part to those people just feeling very alone in their experience, and isolating, and they do spin out. But it really doesn't have to be that way. And you can leave and you can live a very fulfilled life, being creative, being successful. It's absolutely possible. And I would like people to see some examples of that, because even though, we're still humans who live and have our challenges, we've managed to do some pretty rad stuff. And I just want everyone to know that that's possible for them as well. And if they're going through that incredibly rough transition out, it doesn't last forever. And things do get better with time.
That is a great message, and that resonates with me a lot. Because when I was waking up, that's actually one of the things that helped to wake me up, is that I was having really good, happy experiences after leaving the organization. And I was raised to believe that that was absolutely impossible. So it just made me, and I met people who were really, really good and nice people, who genuinely cared for me. And I was raised to believe that that was impossible as well. So it started making me think, what else have I been told that isn't true? So I really love that message. Life outside of the organization can be fulfilling and prosperous and happy.
And healthy. Yep.
And healthy,
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What about you, Ryan?
The risk of repeating those guys, I'm very much, there was a recent comment on Reddit about the movie where somebody said it was a strange experience to watch somebody else on the screen for 2 hours and feel seen. And that just keeps going through my head, because it does feel super lonely when you're going through all of this stuff. And I was raised a witness, so I never knew anything else. I didn't have anywhere else to go. And I think that what this movie, for me, what I hope it does is I hope it helps people who are, physically and mentally out, or people who are afraid to think twice about stuff that keeps echoing through their head, and they know it doesn't fit, but they don't want to look too closely at it. Like, I think the fact that the movie takes the kind of compassionate, humanitarian, biographical approach rather than the doctrinal attack approach hopefully helps people realize that, like, you feel alone, but you're part of a community. There are more people who have left the witnesses than there are currently people who are in the witnesses. And those people, one of the things you have been told that is not true is that those people are all mentally diseased and they're all evil and they are all out to get you. But they're not. They're just people. We're all people. We do silly. There's a thing in the movie where somebody's like, it calls me I think it's Chad calls me a quirky weirdo or something like that, or maybe it's Eric. Somebody says he's a quirky weirdo. Yeah, and
don't assign that man's words to me.
but the fact is that, like, whether you're a witness, whether you're not a witness, you're a person. And you're doing your best, and things happen. And to Scott's point, people shouldn't use the horrific tool of social ostracism and shunning as a way to manipulate or control other people's emotions. And people who feel like they have second thoughts or doubts or just straight up disagreements with a belief system that's been given to them should recognize that, you can become part of a community of positive people just as much as an ex-witness as you can as a witness. There's not some magic bullet that makes the people inside the witnesses the good guys and everybody else the bad guys. And I think that would have been a good, healthy message. It's probably, I hope, a good, healthy message for every current witness to get exposed to at some point, is demystifying the worldly people and understanding that shunning's a survivable experience if you do things, if you look at it the right way, and if you connect with other people.
Absolutely. That's a great message. Thank you. We have a question from one of the viewers. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right. Estee R. Eric Orion, were you guys loud singers when singing the Kingdom melodies?
Yep, it was me and this.
No comment.
Year's wife. Not particularly. I might try and add a harmony here and there, as embarrassing as that feels now.
I definitely was. Yeah, I was all like, the Kingdom melodies were like, oh yeah, I get to sing. Woo! Everybody wants to hear this, and may or may not have been true. I love that question. What a great question.
Yeah. In my local area, there was a brother from a neighboring congregation, and he was the loudest singer I've ever heard in my life, inside or outside the Kingdom Hall. And he was the visiting speaker once when I was at the meeting, and I was actually sitting next to him, and he sang like he was at a football match. It was just so, like, it wasn't even singing, it was just shouting. And it was the first time I'd ever heard it, and I tried so hard not to laugh, obviously, but I just couldn't help it. I was in pain from trying to hold in the laugh. It actually hurt. I'll never ever forget that. It was the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I think every congregation had somebody who was like really, really loud, or somebody who thought they were a professional singer when they clearly weren't.
It's kind of funny. My mom was actually a semi-professional singer, at least in the sense that she got paid money to sing with her band. So, but she was never the super loud one in the congregation. So, but there were a couple other people who definitely took the volume up. I just never had good volume control in general. Everybody was always telling me I was very loud. And they would tell me, or maybe that's what they were trying to say when I took it that way, when they said, "Shut up, Ryan," so.
Okay, we have another question from Post Cult. I don't know how to pronounce that last word. I'm so sorry. Did you ever think that some of the Kingdom melodies sounded like something you had heard before? Some of those songs, I'm sure, were plagiarized, but I'm not a musician.
I can think of one example that I find kind of funny, because I remember it was the district convention that year was right after the first Jurassic Park movie had come out, and the Jurassic Park movie had this melody in it that was like,
yeah,
and there was a Kingdom melody with the same thing, and everyone was looking around like, "Are we in Jurassic Park?" Yeah, that's the only one that sticks in my head. None of the other ones
definitely does.
Yep.
It definitely sounds like a Kingdom melody, yeah.
I heard they've gotten litigated a lot by different music groups or music production companies, and that's why they keep changing the songbook, is because they're getting litigated for melodies and full-on like song plagiarism. So they're
Really?
quoting songs. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, they're not doing it actively, but they have had to do that multiple times, which is why they keep issuing new books.
Wow.
I've heard that online. I don't know.
There
Well,
is
if it was on
one
the
that
internet.
sounds.
Yeah.
There's one that sounds a lot like the German national anthem. I can't remember which one it is.
Oh boy.
Pre-World War II, or
It's not the one about the molested bees, is it?
I was actually thinking of a story about the molested bees. I never really had any witness friends because like there wasn't anyone my age. So all my high school friends were my main community. So I invited this woman who I wrote a song about. Actually, it's on my little album I put out back then. But I brought her to the Kingdom Hall one time. The only time this ever happened. I brought one worldly friend, normal human, and that was the song. Was the molesting bee song? She was like,
yeah.
What
you beat them off. Yeah.
Me and my siblings would always just crack up laughing at that lyric.
It was hard to sing that one.
It was very,
I was
very
trying
hard.
to be good.
There's just no getting through that passage for me.
No.
I cracked up every time I ever sang it. No exceptions. It was amazing.
There's so many rhymes to choose from. Somebody sat and wrote that song, and they had like contested, congested, like they had to go with molested. There was a pen to paper at one point, like steer left, wrong rhyme.
But they followed it on with "But I will ever beat them off." Like, why?
It was written by a 13-year-old.
I mean, I've written a lot of lyrics in my life. I've never been tempted to go down that road. That's insane.
It's true.
All of that aside,
yeah.
so many years later, that is still making us laugh. So maybe it was subversive. Like,
You know what? I
Imagine the
actually would
laughter.
prefer the subversive humor theory for that song. That somebody knew what they were doing, and they were like, "I'm getting this one past the goalie." All right,
8 million people will sing this.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah. We have a question from a friend of the channel, Kim Silvio. Now the film has wrapped, where to now? Any future plans?
I'm going to sit in this room here and read these books. That's pretty much it. No.
So for me, I dedicated this whole year to kind of putting the film out. It takes a lot of back end, like professional side of the film world, the legal side, there's a lot to it, and the marketing is like a big piece of that. So 2023 is simply me trying to get people to watch this thing, and it's a full-time job. So I quit my engineering job to do this, and so that's my future plan, is near future focused. And as far as other films, I did shoot another film about a year ago, totally unrelated to the topic, about a young Chinese American woman who's a friend of mine who I rock climb with, and her like passion for rock climbing and living like a dirtbag out of her car, which she did for a year and a half after when the pandemic happened. When she's like, I would tell her like, "Oh, you could totally just do this, and if you don't want to get a job," and she just went for it and like spent like 8 months on the road living out of her car. So like we did a little short film with her. So that I'm excited to finally have time to maybe look into the story of that and having it cut. I have this rock climbing friend who agreed to edit it and maybe put it in the film festival run. So that's kind of refreshing because it's nothing to do with Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm really excited about that. But on the topic of this film, I've been doing a lot of technical edits the last 2 months to kind of like get the film ready for actually streaming on platforms out in the world. And there's a lot. I want to get the film just right. So I changed a bunch of songs, and I did a bunch of visual cuts, and everyone here has seen the latest version. But it's what's on Patreon is actually the film festival run version. So it's like 1% changes. So the film is great as it is, but you'll see the new version come up there soon. But it got me looking at a bunch of other content, and there's a ton, like you said, Riley, you loved all the old school footage that Ryan and James were working on. They have a ton of content. That's also a scratch of the surface. There's like 30 video pieces that they did, and like there's so much more that you could tell about this story if you want to interview these people. I feel like the film's almost like a table of contents, even though it has like a strong story arc and climax. But then I also started digging into the people who are still in their religion have released a bunch of content in more the the second wave of Nuclear Gopher world. In Eric's age group, my age group, they were making a ton of stuff and putting out albums, and they put out a lot of videos of the showing another side of this whole same story. And I think it could be really interesting to get permissions from them. And I've reached out to everybody that I could find content from, and they never responded. So like, they're probably not interested. But maybe once the film is out, they'll have a change of heart and be like, hey, like, we could do a short piece on this or that, or like, we want to, I don't know, it could be a sequel that like shows the Jehovah's Witness side of this film, and that could be really interesting to dive into. But I mean, I don't have any hopes that anyone's really going to do that, but it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'll bet you $100 against that one, but I love your other ideas. And if it does happen, awesome. I'll happily give you the $100, man.
Like a film battle, like ExJW versus the JDubs. Like, who makes a better story?
I am legit gonna bring the Nuclear Gopher thing back. Not as it was in the old way as a JW thing, but we're gonna do some things, soundtrack album, some other music. I don't want to get too much into promising things that are on the boards or in the works, but I feel like this movie's sort of dragging me out of creative retirement and making me want to make things again. So partially that's to support Scott and the film, but also partially it's because this film has reminded me that it's a lot of fun to make stuff, and it makes me want to make more stuff. So I will definitely be I will be getting back into I have already. It's not like I haven't. I've actually got several things that I've been working on pretty heavily for the last couple of years since
Tell us about your album.
The film made its way out. I don't know if I want to tell about the album. No, I do. I do have a new album that I've been working on. Some of the music from that album is in this film, and it'll be like my first actual like album release in over a decade. So I'm like Scott is with the film. I'm working really hard on getting it right, and I've got a few more studio sessions ahead of me to finish tracking some things, and then I get to go into mixing and mastering, and then I get to figure out how to put it up for some sort of a vinyl pre-order. But this will all be on nucleargopher.com eventually, and the plan for that site is to take all of our old content on Creative Commons and make it all freely downloadable, because it's kind of a lot of it's downloadable today from like archive.org or from NGP Vault or from nucleargopher.org. It's like kind of distributed. I want to bring a lot of this old content together and just put it out there so that it's, if you watch the movie and you're like, this is fun, and you want to go play around in that world and see what us idiots were up to in our 20s, you're more than welcome to. There's also some really good records. There's one Lavone album in particular, which was really the first real Nuclear Gopher album from 1989 that I have some plans to remix and remaster and release. So there's things that will be happening now that Scott made me stop sitting around smoking cigars, driving old cars, and hanging out with dogs, and starting to think about being creative again. So thank you, Scott.
I love that. I love seeing your world light up with your projects.
I'm literally just this close to installing the new wood floor in the studio downstairs. I've totally renovated the space. I'm setting it up for broadcast and audio, and you're gonna like it when you come visit.
I want the Ryan Sutter Nuclear Gopher radio show to exist.
It's on the drawing board.
So cool.
One idea I had when we first talked about this, because we shot in Ryan has this downstairs studio, so we see that with the big library in the film. And that's what you're talking about renovating, right? That same space. But the other cabin, at some point, you said like you wanted to make that like an actual proper music studio where we actually shot the live performance. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, the Cedar Cabin project is sort of still a. I mean, I've done a bunch of stuff on it. It's not ready to go yet, but yes, I do have a kind of long-term plan to make that a space where bands can come out and record and do stuff. There's just a lot of the logistics of transforming that space for something more than a one-day video shoot. I mean, it was fine for us to cut a hole in the wall and stick an air conditioner inside and set all the equipment up and do all that like good old DIY style like we do in the movie. But to turn it into a 4-season building is turning out to be a little more challenging. So, but I don't know. It's fun and I'm doing it. So
what I wanted to bring up was I keep on meeting ex-witness musicians, and they don't have to be ex-witnesses, but that's who I'm meeting right now because of the movie. But I would like to send them to Nuclear Gopher Studios someday. I mean, not send them, like ask them to talk to you.
Yes.
I'm not paying for anyone.
You mean sending them to contact me, not physically
exactly.
mailing people to my house, which
right.
Yeah.
Send them to a nice farm upstate.
Or maybe you could start a record label that's exclusive to ExJW artists.
There we go.
I could, but that would be too limiting. Yeah, actually, the thing I'm much more interested in, it's not, no disrespect to the ExJW factor of this film, because it's obviously an extremely relevant part, but I also I like making music and working with musicians, and the majority of the musicians that I work with now are people of no relationship whatsoever to the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I think the same is also true with Eric. And so Nuclear Gopher, if you were a random person who wasn't a witness back in the 90s and you found us online, we never mentioned the witnesses on our site. We weren't doing, witness music. We were witnesses who were doing music. So the indie DIY kind of aesthetic thing is definitely the through line and all of our historical stuff, but I'm not gonna limit it to people who happen to have been or have been associated with the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's going to be more broad than that, I guess. I hope.
Cool. Scott, you mentioned earlier that you were hoping to distribute the film to some streaming platforms. Are you able to say legally what ones you're aiming for?
I don't have any. We have a goal, and the goal is to get it on Tubi. So Tubi is global platform. It's got 1% of the streaming market share of the planet, and they actually pay. They have ads. It's like every 10 or 15 minutes there's a 2-minute ad, which I don't love for the viewing of my film. But so we can do right now. We're doing ad free on Patreon, and then Tubi will be the ad platform. And there may be at some point 5 or 10 other options, because each platform you get it on, it exposes you to another audience, because it's just someone going on their smart TV, clicking on an app, and then it's whatever is there, or they could search the film. And some people don't have them all downloaded, or some places or platforms are restricted to different regions or countries. And I'm trying to be strategic about it. But all my indie filmmaker friends here in Los Angeles that I've made and other places in the country, they've done very well on Tubi, and it gets a lot of high praise right now, just because their financial side of the model is really good, and the company does a really good job of putting a lot of energy into Tubi. I think Fox Entertainment bought them or something a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And it's a good spot to land for a film in terms of making it make sense, financially viable. And then other places like Plex, Roku, Pluto, like there's a bunch of other like ad-based streaming platforms that it'll get on. And then with this aggregator I'm using to put the film out, there's distribution or aggregation. Aggregation means I have to do more work. Distribution means that they're going to rip you off as a filmmaker more and probably take your future from you. So I went with the aggregator route. It gives me a lot of options, but a lot of work. So I manually have to choose each platform that it gets on and submit it, and they can reject it or not.
Right.
So that's the stage I'm at right now. I'm just about to put that file out. It's like a 100 gigabyte file. It's crazy.
Wow.
Great. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I really do hope that it gets on there. I wish you all the best of success with that.
Thank you.
We have another question from Anita. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. How long have you guys been out of JWs?
18 or 19 years for me.
Wow, it's a long time.
Early 2004, so about the same. I predate Eric by a bit.
Late 2008. Actually, there's like a direct through line that we talk about in the film. Ryan created a blog called Hira Hira, and that was influencing like everyone in that music community. And I was there, also and being influenced. So like Ryan influenced Eric. Eric was like, Scott, have you ever thought about this question? And then that, over a couple of years, like we all kind of left one after the next. And that's true of everyone in the film, I think.
Right. Cool. Well,
I feel like technically, I was going to say, technically, James influenced Ryan, if the film is to be believed.
Yes.
Yeah. So at the top of this,
the film is absolutely to be believed. Yeah. James gets to be at the top. You're right, and he would appreciate being referred to as the root of the phylogenetic tree. So.
And while we're talking about James, I'm going to plug his book. He wrote a book called Redemption. Wait, actually,
Deliverance
Brian,
at Hand.
Thank you. Yeah, Deliverance at Hand, Redemption of a Devout Jehovah's Witness, I believe is what it is. The subtext. And he's got a bunch of information out about that. He did some speaking events and atheist groups. And he's written for other atheist books. He's a great guy. And
James also used to host a TV show on local cable access in the Twin Cities called Atheist Talk. I think there's quite a few of those episodes are available online if you can't get enough James Zimmerman in your life. Also, his book is really good. So I do recommend it to people. James was like, his nickname was like Assembly Boy when we were kids because he was on every assembly and he's a third generation witness and all this stuff. So his story of exit actually predates mine by a long shot. James was physically and mentally out for better part of a decade before before me. So
before he dropped the
arc bomb on me. Yeah.
Arc bomb.
Yeah, I really enjoyed James's contribution to the movie. His story of how he woke up was it was mind blowing, and how quickly he woke up as well. After he first started asking questions. But I understand that he stayed in for a little while after that, which a lot of people do. He
was married with kids, and I mean, there's a picture in the movie of me standing next to him, both wearing tuxes, and it's because we're at his wedding. And so his wife, he didn't want to disrupt things for her, and like I said, third generation. But another thing that's not something that's shown in the movie, and that Scott, you really should add a little blurb, is that watchtowerletters.com, which is where all of the correspondence between James and the Watchtower Society, every letter he wrote back and forth to them about the flood. Wow. There are some screenshots. You can read them all. Every one of those letters is scanned and hosted at watchtowerletters.com, and it makes a very interesting read if you want to see what the society has to say about some of the stuff that we talk about here.
I just made a note that will go into the movie. Thanks, Ryan.
Yep.
We should have these meetings not on a live channel.
I'm going to put that in the video description below as well.
Yes, please do.
That's really interesting. Yeah. A couple of the letters were briefly shown in the movie, and I thought it was really, really excellent that he done that in the first place, because a criticism that a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and not just ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Christians get in general, is that you're looking for it to not be true. Mm-hmm. You just want to go and live a sinful life, so you're just looking for excuses. But I think James's story showed that he wasn't doing that at all. He really wanted it to be true. He wanted it to make sense.
Yeah.
And he was desperately reaching out to them. Please make it make sense for me, because I want to believe this.
Let the record show that I also didn't want to lose connection with much of my family and all of my friends.
Of course.
I truly, truly loved serving as a ministerial servant, being in the foreign language group. Pioneering, yes, it's incredibly hard, but it was fulfilling to me. And I also had a similar knowledge freight train hit me that got me asking questions. And I agree that a lot of because I think people assume that about people who leave whatever religious group. They assume that about them because they have to believe that, because it's a much more difficult thought process to go to when you're a believer and somebody leaves, to try and allow yourself to go down the path of, well, I wonder what they're thinking. I should talk to them about that. Instead, it's like, you're not following the Holy Spirit, and don't listen to the mentally diseased people and all that stuff. But the idea that they're just leaving for honest reasons is a lot harder to swallow. But yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's a thought-stopping cliche, basically. Is to prevent themselves from questioning their own faith. If they entertain the idea that there is even something to be questioned, then what naturally arises from that is, well, should I question it? And I think that cliche is to protect their own, thought process and faith ultimately. Yeah. But guys, this has really been great. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Or this afternoon for you guys.
It was really nice to meet you. This was really great. Thank you, Riley.
Likewise, thank you. So viewers, thank you as well for joining us. Please, I really, really encourage you to, I hate that word. It sounds so JW, encourage. I haven't found an alternative yet. I really encourage you to watch the movie. You can see it on patreon.com/Witness Underground. All relevant links for the movie and also the music will be in the video description below. So please check that out. So thanks again. It's been great. Thank you guys again. I wish you all the best of success with this movie. I hope it reaches all the people you want it to reach. I hope it achieves all the goals that you've set for it. It really, really deserves to, because it was absolutely great and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you.
Really appreciate that, Riley.
Okay.
Thanks, Riley.
Be in touch.
That was very upbuilding.
It was very upbuilding.
It was very, and your movie is very commendable.
I knew that was coming. I knew that one was coming. Perfect note.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.
Thank you so much for watching to the very end of the video. If you haven't already done so, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you like my work and want to help me continue doing it, please support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Jexit_2020.